I first came across Armin Strom probably about 5 years ago at a watch show in London, and I was taken by their futuristic twist on traditional watchmaking and their use of space, or rather their creation of space within their watches. Collective Horology, the sponsor of this video, they've got something awesome dropping on the 8th of November in partnership with Armin Strom. Collective Horology have sent me here to Biel in Switzerland to explore Armin Strom.
My name is Claude Greisler. I'm born in a watchmaker family. So my grandparents already worked in the watch industry. My grandmother had 6 children. Right. I have a lot of cousins, but I'm the only one who really got fascinated by watches. And I always wanted to learn more about, when we were sitting with our grandmothers, there was like some of the cousins, they played football and or did some other stuff. But I was so fascinated because they had a glass cube, and inside of this glass cube there was a disassembled movement, and you could move it around and explore the wheels and the small screws, and this I could spend hours and hours by just touching this cube and seeing how everything works. So I was very, very fascinated about this small world of mechanical engineering. My grandmother was assembling stopwatches, chronographs, and this is how I got into watches. I mean, we got taught even before college, we got taught by our grandmother how to assemble and disassemble watch movements, and this is a love which I kept, and I definitely wanted to become a watchmaker. So I graduated in watchmaker school to become a watchmaker. But after the watchmaker school, I was still curious. I still wanted to learn more about watches, and went to the museum in La Chaux-de-Fonds, which is one of the biggest watch museums in the world, and got an extra education in watch restoration and high-end watches. This additional education allows you to understand tourbillons, minute repeaters, perpetual calendars, more about the history of watchmaking. I think there's so many small parts involved and everything has to work mechanically together that it's more than just a standard, regular, basic driven 3-hand watch. And to be able to chime the time, or to stop the time, or to even become more precise by using a second movement, synchronizing with the first movement, I think this is what drives me.
Could you explain who you are?
Serge Michel, grew up in Burgdorf, same town as you met Claude. We're also, and that's actually why we are here today, it's a town where also Mr. Armin Strom started to be active in his watchmaking career. Right. Yeah. When he started to do his own watches, they always had the name Armin Strom on the watch. Yes. Right. So he was a very talented watchmaker focusing on hand skeletonized watches. He did a lot of servicing. His wife, it was actually a business with his wife and Mr. Armin Strom. His wife, Anna Maria, Italian, she was selling watches like Omega, Zenith, they have a couple of brands, and he was doing services. And suddenly he had the idea, why should I just sell watches from other brands? I could do actually my own brand. And this is how everything started. So he was doing his pocket watch and put it in the window of his shop. But nobody bought it. So it took him a couple of trials until he came up with this métier d'art, with this craftsmanship of skeletonizing watches. And then this is where the success started. I remember my first experience when I met Mr. Armin Strom. My dad purchased a watch. My father and Mr. Armin Strom really got friends. And I went to the basement, to this dark little room where Mr. Armin Strom was sitting and hand skeletonizing his watch. It was so fascinating for me. Claude, at the other hand, his parents, they have a shop just next to Armin Strom for optical instruments, glasses, things like this. And so he was also had early contacts with Mr. Armin Strom because they were almost neighbors.
He was a legend in Burgdorf because he was the guy driving a Jaguar E-Type, flying to New York, delivering his own watches. He was farmers doing cheese, and then there was this crazy watchmaker in the 80s, 90s, delivering watches, dealing with Omega. So he was a little bit famous in our small town. And me as a watchmaker was very, very fascinated by his vision of not covering the movement with the dial. Because he, as a watchmaker, was also very fascinated about the three-dimensional mechanical aspect of a watch. And he said, you know, as soon as somebody starts to buy watches with a crystal back, this is where our clients are, because they are really willing to see and to explore and to enjoy the watch movement.
When I had the opportunity to get closer in touch with Mr. Armin Strom to take over the brand, well, it wasn't really a brand back then, but take over the heritage of the watches from Armin Strom. I talked to my friend, and he knew, of course, that Claude is a very talented watchmaker and that we should meet.
The biggest difference in what Armin Strom did and what we do today is Armin Strom did not have the opportunity to manufacture his own movement. So he was buying high-end movements and then skeletonized them to be open worked, and we really do build our watches to be open worked. That's the biggest difference. I think it's the new chapter of skeletonized watches. Today we are more driven by tradition, but back in those days they were really driven by a need. And I think the cool thing about complications is if you understand the need, why they did, or why they tried to achieve a tourbillon movement to become more precise, because navigation was very important, or for a resonance to be to calculate the longitude. Those kind of things, they were very, very important in the back, and I think this is what drives us to understand the history and to reinvent what was done in the past. Engineers say that form follows function, but in Armin Strom it's more than just form follows function. We really try to create a very nice looking mechanical way of having the movement visible on the dial side.
When you see the complexity of what Armin Strom, what we are doing here, we do really every part in-house, every screw is done in-house, every bridge, so from the design, the construction, we have 3 people just working in the design department together with Claude. Design and construction department. Then we have the people on the milling machines, and then of course many watchmakers. Yeah. Really, they take all they do all the hand finishings, and so it's a very long step to finish an Armin Strom watch. At the moment we do a bit more than 400 pieces a year. So with the team we are here, but situations is like a few of the independent brands, also Armin Strom, the orders really almost doubled. The philosophy today of Armin Strom is still the DNA of what Armin Strom did. Of course, we go much further with our complete own manufacture, with doing our own movements. Mr. Armin Strom was doing decoration on existing movements, but showing the movements, showing all the details, all the hand finishings on the calibers, it's the heritage of Mr. Armin Strom. That's why we thought, and I'm absolutely happy with the decision to keep the name Armin Strom.
As an engineer, you always try to be better, to try to improve what you already have done. I mean, this is what drives us, this is what drives my team. We always try to reinvent things. You know, we go open the old books, think about problems which they tried to solve, but maybe they didn't achieve because they didn't have the same technology we have today.
So we are, let's say, a very innovative young watch brand. Independent brand, of course, and innovation. So we do what we do often do. We look back in the history, what have been done, and we try to make it better with the knowledge we have today. So but we're taking old concepts from the early watchmaking days and convert it to the new world. With the focus always the focus on the movement. But the movement is always on the center, so the aesthetic and the design at the end of an Armin Strom timepiece must always be the focus of the brand.